Peace, what's up? So this video is going to be on a controversial subject, but I think it's super important, and given the time of year, we're close to Valentine's Day, so I'm going to just start right off by saying romance is a psyop, and I'll go into why that is, and kind of break down the word, break down the esoteric interpretation of what this means, what it's doing to our energies, how it's got us constantly being drained and used by the world, how it takes advantage of a lot of our traumas, it takes advantage of aspects of ourself that we haven't healed. So, yeah. So to start it off, let's look at romance. What is in that word? Roman. So we can look back to the Roman culture, right? The Romans. Who were these guys? I mean, it's basically established fact that the government, the institutions, the religions that we still cling to today, that make up the structure of our world today, are largely founded off Roman cultures, Roman practices, Roman laws, right? Roman ways of governing. So our structure, aside from dating and interpersonal relationships, adopts and inherits a lot of Roman ways of going about things. So when we think about romance, why this is so central to the psyops of the world and how it makes us NPCs and batteries for this Archon matrix, is that essentially what it's doing is we've got this 2,000-year-old culture, right? It's basically prescribed and normalized and made appropriate casual forms of hedonism, which is exalting your pleasures, living a pleasure-seeking life. Constant, like, pleasure is the highest virtue, the highest value. That's what they've got us all invested in at a subconscious level due to the things we've been exposed since we were children, right? You got movies, TV, shows, books, music. It's literally weaved into everything, this romance narrative. And we've been duped. We've all been lied to. We've all been sold a fantasy. Because the reality is, even though everybody prioritizes their romantic desires and they go out and they seek to get these things fulfilled, truth is, not one person on earth has been fulfilled spiritually through romance. And I'll just say it like that. And that's going to allow me to transition into this next statement, is that there's so many spiritualized versions of romance that exist in this world, right? Be it soulmates, twin flames, So it's hard to separate just romance by itself from like spiritual ideals and things, because we constantly want to conflate the two, and we want to have this narrative, this fantasy narrative, like the universe and the stars and everything is working together to suit our desires, the things that we want from other people, the things that give us pleasure. But here's the thing, is this is actually living backwards. This is not love. None of this is love. This is actually the inversion of love, because what it's doing is it's rendering your spiritual energies to drain into the material realm, because you think that love comes with sense gratification or sensuality, or love is sex, blah, blah, blah. No. Sex is a procreative act. This is a creative principle. And sex can be used in a correct way or it can be used in an incorrect way. And sexual energy isn't just animal instincts. Your whole organism is sexual energy. You were birthed from this shit. So your whole mode of operating in existence is sexual energy. And that, again, we're not talking about just sinking into your desires and trying to get that shit gratified. What we're talking about is creative principles that make up your entire being, like your whole entire energy state. Your chakras and everything are constantly masculine and feminine energies coming together to create new energies. So we do this in subtle ways and in blatantly obvious ways. But the thing is, through romance and what it does to our minds, how the fantasy basically makes us confuse lust and love. So we pursue after lust in the name of love. Oh, I love this. I love that. I love what he does for me. I love my car. I love my house. None of that shit is love. These are all lower base, lower chakras, animalistic natures, which, like I was saying, none of this shit has to do with your spiritual purpose. So you'd be best to totally drop your twin flame concept, drop your soulmate concept. You need to come at it from a new perspective and say, really, love resides inside me first. Love is not sensual gratification. So, and let's also look at what romance is in terms of what it's doing in terms of dating, is that everybody wants to prioritize their romantic desires, right? These things go above what would be natural soul ways of bonding and connecting, which would be like, okay, you got attraction, you got chemistry, you got affection, you've got care, you've got like being there for someone, loyalty, respect. These are all cool. This is all natural. These are all appropriate ways of going about connection with the opposite sex, right? But romance wants to take all these attributes, package it in a nice, pretty bow that caters to your specific fantasy. And now it's got your upper centers, your higher natures, your higher self, and your higher chakras. Now they're starting to get stifled because now you're contributing your mental thoughts, you're building thoughts and feelings in regards to something that now you're projecting outside of your being. So you can't meet your mirror self. You can't meet your actual twin flame, your other half, through romance. You can't go out into the world and say, I'm seeking a romantic partner from God and all this stuff, because it's not going to happen that way. Your romantic gratifications aren't proof or confirmation that spirit is in your life. It's that's actually a spirit of the world. That's not the wholeness, the spirit of wholeness, that you're actually playing out a spirit of the times. You're just like, you're like playing out a narrative in a script subconsciously. And what all this does is it excites our egos, because we're like, oh my God, I can get this fantasy met. And we start conflating our true self with our ego self more and more. And as that solar plexus starts building up energy and it drops into your sacral and your root, now that your lust and your survival preservation instincts start getting a taste of this fantasy, now that's going to motivate you to go out and pursue it through all the mediums of the world and all the cultural stuff. So what you really need to know, though, is what it's doing is it's dragging your heart into your lower base natures. And for a man, essentially all this is the desire to bust, or the desire to just indulge, which is basically rendering your entire energy system in a down and out frequency. So your kundalini becomes dormant, and this is going to render you just an ignorant person. You're ignorant of yourself. You don't know yourself. And you're going to become identified with how yourself is sexualized versus how it's spiritualized. And all your 7 sacred virtues are going to become inverted, and they're going to become the 7 deadly vices, or the 7 deadly sins. And they're all going to feed into each other. And this is going to render you a demon. You're going to become a demon in your pursuit of love. And this is the shit, is that that's why it's so dangerous, is people are exalting hedonism and calling that spiritual, and they don't know that they're doing this. They think that, oh, like this is appropriate in society to feel this way and to do these things. But nobody ever ends up being fulfilled. Every partner you go through, now you're accumulating karma, you're building up baggage, you're adding weight to your traumas of life that you probably had from your first relationship that you didn't realize that the reason why it traumatized you in the first place was because you were brainwashed into pursuing your romantic desires and thinking that shit was spiritual or some shit. So, and then on the front of men and gender roles, what this tends to do is men become feminized because we're supposed to be mind over matter. We're supposed to be mind over body, whereas women are body, mind, men are mind, then body. So when a man is over centralized, he's constantly trying to please the woman and all this stuff. It becomes his whole purpose. He loses his spiritual purpose, which makes him feminine. It makes him a beta male. It makes him the simp. And then women end up being the ones more in their minds. They be the ones pushing men's buttons, psychologically kind of fucking with them and manipulating things around. So this ends up being an inversion of principle, an inversion of the creative principle, because we're supposed to be coming together based off of a true creative spirit. And what does that creative spirit do when two people come together as true individuals? Because spirituality is about your individuality. When these two people come together, those two energies create a third energy, and that's the energy of the relationship itself. And this energy becomes something that both of y'all contribute to. And in the metaphysics, esoterics, this energy itself can sustain you guys. So now both you guys are contributing to this energy orb that either of you can tap into, and any time and space, whether you guys are with each other physically or not, and you guys can fill each other up with energy and give each other support. This is what's supposed to be happening. We're supposed to be forming astral tethers with the right type of people. But in this day, and in dating in this world and in this time, the wrong people are getting together, and the people that should be together aren't together. So we have a big mess. It's a big sloppy ass pile of garbage that we call the dating world. And if you're a man with any sense, and I'm speaking mainly to men because I am one, you would realize, and if you have a spiritual backbone, if you actually have real nuts, like you're a man of truth, you would see that all this shit is basically the ways of the world trying to convince you to become someone you're not. And unfortunately, in these days and times, it seems that women are falling more into this psyop trap, where that's how they get to men, is that usually men will kind of like have a no bullshit detector. But because romance and everything's been so normalized, and also the way men are feminized, even in their upbringing from their parents and their mothers, men are easily seduced. We're easily pulled into relationships out of a feeling of like longing, or feeling like a void needs to be filled and all this stuff. But as a man, you shouldn't be having that shit at all. You should be just yourself fully. And this is really what the Holy Spirit is. This is the spirit of wholeness. You're whole by yourself. But when two people come together in that way, that's some real spiritual power. But they got all of us thinking we have to go find someone to fix me, or to fulfill me, or to fill that void. And that void is, like I was saying, you're in a down and out frequency. Your energy is constantly draining. So unless you, in your own space and in your own isolation, learn how to plug that shit up, aka for most men, this is going to be get on semen retention, bro. Stop fapping. Do no fap. Take this shit seriously. You only got one life to live in terms of this body and this mind. You should be preserving this shit. You should be building it up with your seed. And when you value your seed as a man, You're not going to be pursuing romantic lust. You're not going to be wanting to bust to lust. You're going to be retaining for gains, and you're not going to be self-sexualized. You're not going to be overly identifying with how other people want to sexualize you. You're not, oh, what does this person think of me? Oh, does she think I'm hot? Oh, am I handsome in her eyes? Oh, blah, blah, blah. When I go in public, how am I being perceived? None of this shit should be on your priority list for things you should think about and feel about. But we've been brainwashed for the past 2,000 years with this romance psyop that, again, going back to the beginning of the video, what has it done? It's prescribed and made appropriate casual hedonism. And this is what modern dating is. And now with the advent of technology, this makes it an exponential problem. So we need to be on check, because it's always going to be the minority of people that get this shit that don't fall into their lower natures, because most people out here are NPCs. They're operating off of their Hylic status as a spirit incarnate. They're lost in their sleep. Their souls are asleep. The only way to know they exist is through sense affirmation, sense confirmation. And the highest form of that is, right, sexuality. So if you're allowing romance to confuse your sense of what sexuality is, how to work with that energy, how to even perceive it in another person, you've been duped. And don't fall into this thing like God is prioritizing your desires, like God's invested in your desires being met. God's invested in your procreative energy. God's invested in your creative energy. If you can use this productively and creatively, then God's going to back that. But if you're just running around recklessly with this energy, then you're a chaotic being. God doesn't want shit to do with that. So stop praying for someone to come into your life and shit. It'll happen by itself. So I'm talking to everybody. I mean, even myself at the end of the day. But if this needs to be confirmation for you, pray for something else. Meditate on something else, bro, because you harping over that in your mind, you may not realize it right now, but it stems back to this romance fantasy that we've all been duped since we were children. And we need to cultivate the 7 sacred virtues. We do not need to be dipping into these 7 deadly sins, 7 deadly vices. Because for each chakra, right, there's a way to sin. There's a way to miss the mark. So you got to be on point. You got to have yourself aligned at all times. When you're in the world, not of it. This is a big part, because romance will have you being of the world, especially if you're spiritualizing it. You're going to think that your whole purpose for being here is for some twin flame thing or something like that. And again, I'm not necessarily going to say that every person that's ever felt something spiritual in a relationship is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is these terms and language are all wrapped in this romance narrative that we need to distill. We need to like just level the playing field and stop buying into these terms and ideologies. And we need to go at things from a raw, natural state. Prioritize true forms of connection instead of our romantic interests, because it leads to everything we're seeing in the world. All these dipping into corrupt ways of relating to the opposite sex. And nobody's getting together. The family becomes, the family unit gets destroyed. Marriages aren't really based on love anymore. Everything's for narcissism and hedonism. So, yeah, wrap it all up. Your romance is not spiritual, bro. God isn't invested in your romantic desires. So get up out of that shit. Do what your heart and your center in terms of true love knows, because true love is the love of truth. It starts there. It starts in the mind and in the heart. Your mind needs to know your heart, and your heart needs to love your mind. So now you're loving yourself. You know yourself, and you know, and you love, and you love, and you know. So boom. Now you're whole. Now you're a whole being. You're in the Holy Spirit. Fucking operate from that shit and build from there. Don't go into the world seeking a void. That's the abyss, bro. Don't open Pandora's box. You'll get sucked in. So that's my 2 cents. And pretty long rant, but we'll end it here. And yeah. Peace.